Hey, hello, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of It's Lit, It's Dalck. Okay, today we're gonna start with a lesson based on one of my favorite types of literature, which is epics, something that we call an epic poem. And the subject of study for this lesson will be based on that epic poem called Beowulf. All right, so let's start by telling you guys that there are three aspects that we're going to be analyzing in this video, which will help you to analyze after you read the excerpt from Beowulf that we will be studying later on. All right. So the first thing that we got to do is how to analyze characteristics of an epic poem. Okay, that is the first aspect to study from this video. Number one, analyzing the characteristics of an epic poem. An epic poem is a long narrative poem that celebrates a hero's deeds, the accomplishment of the great hero Beowulf. All right, so a traditional epic or an epic poem like Beowulf, it began as an oral poem. It was retold over many generations before they were finally written down and being created as part of literary work of the culture that they belong to. An epic poem shares certain characteristics and conventions. That's what makes them a specific genre in literature. Okay, these could be listed under genre elements that we're going to see in just a few minutes. We're going to use a chart, if you may, write down to list this one to analyze the different characteristics that you can find in Beowulf. Now, epic poetry have the elements as this. Number one, it's written about a hero who is usually a strong, courageous person of nobility. So no secondary underdog over there. No, this has to be a very strong person, something like King Arthur or King Arthur's son, all right? Something like that. A hero who is strong, courageous, and has all the looks and the power to be a hero in this kind of epic poem, all right? The second characteristic that you're going to be analyzing and looking for clues in the reading is that it usually involves supernatural creatures, great deeds, and perilous journeys. You know, something like very similar to the Greek mythology, where you find, for example, Perseus going into the labyrinth with this huge creature, the Minotaur. So that is kind of an epic poem as it is. In that case, it was not written as a poem, it's part of the mythology, but you can easily see how those specific elements of supernatural forces can be worked around to create an epic story or an epic poem in this case. The third element that you're going to find in epic poetry deals with injecting the hero with characteristics that reflects the ideals of a larger culture, which ends up being like the message behind the story, not only to entertain and create an awesome adventure that you can read and have fun and be entertained with, but also to communicate a message behind it, which is the message from the culture itself that creates and surpasses all of the information that they want to share through their values, through their beliefs in this type of literature. Fourth element to be aware of what you analyze, it's that epic poetry normally conveys a universal theme that can be found in the literature of all time periods and cultures. An example of this could be the eternal battle of good versus evil, light versus darkness, right? So these are universal themes that you're always going to find, like the lie versus the truth, loyalty versus betrayal, okay? So these are universal themes, again, that you will find in any epic poetry or any epic type of literature, right? So make sure you keep your eyes open and your ears open for that. The fifth element you can find as part of this genre in epic poetry is that it often features long speeches. Okay, there's always a character that will give you a long speech with a lot of morality behind it, with a lot of message, an intense message behind this huge speech, in which normally the culture itself represents or communicates their values and the main message that they want the reader to catch and understand. Okay, they use formal diction in a serious tone. It's nothing like someone coming into a room and saying whatever it's on their mind and speaking their mind, yelling. No, this has to be, or this normally is depicted as a very formal and special moment in the story. When you read an epic poem, it will help to understand, because it's valid to say that since they are created in a very intricate way, sometimes it's a little bit difficult to understand, specifically vocabulary-wise, grammar-wise. Okay, so I'm gonna give you 4 things to ask yourself as you read an epic poem to help you understand and create a more inferential knowledge of what's going on. So the first question that you have to ask yourself when you read Beowulf is, what qualities does this hero have? What qualities does this hero display? What are the different characteristics of the hero? Number 1, you have to identify who the hero is and then analyze his or her personality, looking for these specific qualities. The second question that you're going to ask yourself is, what are the obstacles that the hero must overcome? All right. What are the difficulties? What are the challenges that are in front of the hero so he or she can overcome and accomplish their purposes? Remember that you should be writing down all of those elements as you ask yourself these questions when you read. The third question that I'm going to give you in order to best understand the story is, what are the themes that this epic story communicates? What are the universal themes that this poem wants to put out there for people to analyze? This is a longer, a wider, yes, a longer in terms of information, a longer answer in terms of information, because this is something that you will analyze once you are finishing or close to ending the reading. So you can go back and reflect, you can go in retrospective and think about, well, I think the theme that is being depicted in this poem could be the eternal struggle between God and the demons, for example, right? So it will be completely up to you to analyze and answer what's the themes that this poem wants to convey. The fourth and last question that I'm going to give you as a trick to best understand this poem is, what are the elements of the epic style that this poem includes? Now, not every epic poem has the same amount or the same structure in elements that they are created with. No, sometimes the author leaves some behind, or they include even more. So the idea is for you guys to sit down a little bit and start, making a list of the different style elements, which we just saw a few minutes ago. All right. The second thing that we're going to be analyzing, okay, it's Old English poetry. And this is what I was talking about when I was telling you that sometimes it's difficult because we don't have all of those old words vocabulary stored in our head. So best thing to do is grab on an online dictionary or a dictionary app that you may have on your phone. Have it there ready so you can start looking for words that you don't understand. And I will always encourage you to also try and guess meaning from the context, because yeah, we don't know 3 or 4 words in a line, but the rest of the words in the paragraph may tell you what they mean. So Anglo-Saxon poets, that means English from very, 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 very old times, they used poem techniques, okay, poetry techniques that made their verses easier to chant. This is the thing. Poetry is intended to be spoken, to be told out loud, all right? And the idea of creating poetry was specifically that, to be on a theater, to be out there in front of people saying and chanting these poems or these type of texts. You're gonna see a chart in the material on the material online that I'm going to also read about right now that will describe important techniques that you can find in the epic poem Beowulf, which is the one that we are going to go under, the scope. The techniques are, number one, alliteration, rhythm, Shizura, and cannings. Okay, I'm going to explain one by one, giving you some examples. Alliteration is just the repetition of consonant sounds. Alliteration deals with pronunciation. It's a repetition of consonant sounds at the beginning of the words in order to unify the lines, to make them sound more, with a lot more fluency. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but I'm going to give you an example. The example line is, in his splendor, he set the sun and the moon. So the consonants, or the sound of the consonant H, which is like a aspiration, it also connects with the letter S and the pronunciation and articulations of the letter S. And when they combine, they create this repetition of sounds in this specific line that says, in his splendor, he set the sun and the moon. So that makes it a lot more rhythmic, that you can listen and, of course, read and give this speech as you read the poem. The second technique that poets used to use and normally still use is called rhythm. Okay, the poem, normally epic poems have strong rhythm created by 4 stresses or beats, strong beats in many of their lines. Now, it's important to say that this 4 beating structure is not it's not present in every line of the poem, but in specific ones where the writer or the poet may want people to listen to and, catch their attention. For example, sometimes a pagan shrine they vowed. I'm exaggerating a little bit when I read this because I want you guys to notice where the stresses are. Okay, so I'm gonna go again. It says, sometimes at pagan shrines they vowed. So this is how a poet would read or, express their writings out there in front of people. They would have to be very dramatic in order for people to pay attention to them and especially catch that message behind it. It was a lot of culture dealing with poetry back at the moment. Probably we don't have so much of that right now, but poetry is really very, very much appreciated. Caesura, I think is the correct pronunciation. It's a pause that divides the line. That is the third element or the third technique used in epic poems. A caesura is a pause that divides the line, with each part having 2 stresses. So we have a line with 4 stresses, but there are pauses every 2 of them, okay? Usually at least 1 stressed syllable in the first part alliterates with a stressed syllable in the second part. So we have a line. The line has 4 strong syllables with a pause in the middle. So normally one of the 2 first stressed syllables alliterates, that means has the same consonant sound as one of the other 2 after the pause. The example would be, when he heard about Grendel, Hylax Thane. I'm gonna go again. When he heard about Grendel, pause, Hylax Thane was home ground. So heard, the one of the stressed syllables, alliterates in the second one with Hylax. I'm gonna read again. When he heard about Grendel, Hylax Thane was on home ground. Over in Gatland. So we have some consonant sounds repeating between the pauses. Remember, there are 2 stressed syllables, a pause, then 2 stressed syllables, and then another pause. And maybe you can complement that line with other 2 stressed syllables, okay? We're gonna see that as we analyze in depth the poem itself. Finally, the 4th technique that poets used to, Anglo-Saxon poets used to do or used to apply back then is the canning. And I love this one because there are so many examples of cannings out there, not only in literature, but also in movies in any other type of stories that you may heard, that you may hear, or you may watch, or you may read. A kenning is a metaphorical compound words. Okay, kennings are metaphorical compound words or phrases that substitute a simple noun. I'm going to give you an example. There's a kenning in the poem itself, in Beowulf. There's a kenning called like Dalck's trusty retainer. That is used in place of the name Beowulf. You're not telling, or they're not describing, or you're not just writing down the name Beowulf, the name of the hero, but you use a definition. You use a phrase that describes what they represent. That is a kenning. Okay. For example, instead of saying Beowulf, they say Dalck's trusty retainer. Another example is for the name Grendel in the poem. Instead of saying just the name Grendel, they go with the dread of the land. See? If you remember the Harry Potter series, instead of saying just the name of Harry or Harry Potter, they would say the child that lived. Or instead of saying Lord Voldemort, you say the one that cannot be named. All right. So those are just two simple examples taken from a very famous and very known series of stories. The third element that we're going to be analyzing in the story, other than number one, characteristics of epic poems, and the second one, characteristics of Old English literature, it's the language convention, right? For language conventions, we're going to go a little lighter because it's been very heavy, the last two elements. So the third and final aspect to analyze in this poem, it's going to be the mood, all right? And this is important. The mood is the feeling or atmosphere that the writer creates for the reader. Remember that, because sometimes we confuse tone with mood, all right? So the tone, on the other hand, is the attitude in which the writer creates a text, okay? What's the attitude? What's the tone? Is it serious? Is it informal? Is it formal? On the other hand, the mood is supposed to be felt by the reader, is what the writer wants me as a reader to feel, okay? Poets can use imagery, alliteration, figurative language, descriptions, word order, word choices, grammar, etc., to create a specific atmosphere, okay, for the reader. The use of all of those literary elements is the one that sets the mood that make the reader evoke feelings, all right? So if you end up feeling sad after reading something, that is the mood the author wanted you to feel. If you feel sorry, if you feel happy and joyful after reading something, that is the mood, how the receptor of the message, in this case, the reader, feels when reading the story. But this is the last element of the analysis that we're going to be doing over the epic poem Beowulf. Thank you very much for your attention, guys. We'll see you very, very soon. Don't forget to click the subscribe button and hit the like on the video. I'll see you guys next time. If it's lit, it's Dalck.